room for our Power Lunch Hour, the room where it really does happen. My name's Catherine White. I'm the program director for Network Nova. And since we kicked up on Saturday, we've been bringing you every day just jam-packed sessions, and we're getting a lot of great feedback. If you want to watch it again, just go to our YouTube channel. Stair will put that in the chat. And I want to give you some of the feedback we've been getting from Kristen Serblis. Great session yesterday. Jennifer Carol Foy was on fire, and she was on fire yesterday about voting, right? And voter suppression. Rose Fabia, thank you, Rose. Wow, every day the Women's Summit brings today's political issues to light by today's experts with engaging discussion. Thank you for such a superb conference. Thank you, that warms our heart to know that we're getting there, we're spot on. And then yesterday from Claire Bodden. Yesterday's Power Lunch was dynamic, fast-paced, supercharged, loved it. So thank you for those wonderful comments. But my favorite from Kathleen Murray really helped me re-energize, turning away from puzzles and eating. Now this is a Power Lunch, so we hope you have a healthy meal in front of you because you are going to need it, because we are going to deliver again for you today. Welcome to day 5 of the experience, brought to you by the letter R for race and rural issues. Today's panel is moderated by our great friend, Krista Jones. She's part of the Women's Summit programming team, and she's also the founder of Vote Lead Impact. She has over 20 years of advocacy, leadership, and political civic engagement experience. She was named one of the Leadership Arlington's top 40 under 40. Now, I don't know if you're still under 40, Krista, but we'll keep you in that category. Her career includes lobbying and advocating for women and socioeconomic status issues. She's a graduate of the Sorensen Institute of Political Leadership and the Women's Campaign School at Yale. She served even in the Peace Corps in Paraguay. And at last year's summit, she led the discussion called Shaking the Table, Getting Real on Race, and she's going to continue shaking things up today. You can find Krista on Twitter at KJ Power Player. So tweet out to her and follow her. And Krista, it's my pleasure to hand the mic over to you. And thank you so much. Good luck.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for that introduction. I am really honored to moderate today's conversation. We started talking about this session before everything that's happening now. So it just so happened that it became very apropos with the timing. But before we start with my opening remarks and our panelist introductions, we're going to see a few remarks from the majority leader of the Virginia House of Delegates, Charnel Herring.
I just want all of us to sort of reflect about the events that happened this spring. From Central Park to a young woman who was killed in her home in Kentucky, to Black men who are killed at the hands of those who are to be keepers of our Constitution. Unfortunately, this has affected not only adults, but children whose innocence have now been lost. My niece, unfortunately, watched the footage, and maybe it's unfortunate because she saw what can happen when we are not ensuring that there is racial harmony in this country. I think the senses of our youth have been awakened by what has happened. And that's why I say over and over that we always have to be vigilant when it comes to race. We always have to be aware and be woke. And if you're not woke now, it is time for you to wake up. This is our country. This is someplace that we all love and we all cherish. People are rioting not because they like to destroy, but because they feel unheard. Martin Luther King said, rioting is sometimes the speech of those who are unheard. I pray that the rioting stops. And I pray that all of us, each and every one of us, remember how we feel. And when we're hopefully able to get back to what normal is, whatever that may be, that we will not forget how we felt when we see footage of police brutality. Not only is it harmful to communities, it is harmful to those law enforcement officers out there who do good every day, that put their lives at risk, and that's not good. So at this time, I just ask us to reflect, be vigilant, fight for good laws, fight for criminal justice reform, where people often feel repressed. And that does not mean that we do not respect victims' rights, but it means we want a more just criminal justice system. So thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak my heart and my mind.
Thank you, Charnel, for those remarks. And truly, you know, Charnel was one of the first African-Americans elected to the General Assembly in Virginia from Northern Virginia. So her rise, her political career is just such a great example of what our country can do and the importance of having diverse voices around the table. So I'd like to start off with some opening remarks before we introduce our panelists. In December of 2017, Doug Jones was elected in a special election to the US Senate from the state of Alabama. It was clear after that election that Black women played a key role in electing Senator Jones, in turn flipping a seat for the Democrats. You then begin to see a lot more public images and attention of the power of Black women in politics, something that many of us have known for decades. Now the public was finally recognizing the power of Black women. And I began to think about why we would often, in 2018 at the time, see Black and white women doing the same voter outreach activities separately. What would happen if we could work together as advocates? How much stronger could we be if we listened to each other and learned from each other? I decided to put together a series of focus groups of Black and white women to discuss how we could work together more effectively and to get to the root of some of the baggage that we carry when working with each other. This baggage starts in slavery, it runs through the suffrage movement, it meanders alongside the feminist movement, and is still present with us today. In those focus groups, we talked about everything from hair to family ideologies about race to even men in the workplace and romantically. Today, we will delve even deeper to discuss key issues such as allyship, trust, and the idea of the white liberal to determine how we can get past some of these long-standing challenges. Last year, as Catherine mentioned, for the Network Nova Women's Summit, I moderated a discussion called Shaking the Table. We knew that if we were going to be ready to do the work, which was last year, taking back the Virginia legislature, which we did, and this year to take back the White House, which we will, we are going to have to do things differently. Last year's conversation ended with Pastor Michelle Thomas saying, we have to do more than shake the table, we have to break the table. It was in that vein that we conceived of this panel, Getting Real on Race. And when today's panelists started planning in the context of the current events in our nation in which race is front and center, from the public murder of George Floyd to the persistent structural inequalities which we are reminded of, they already exist, but we're reminded of through COVID-19, we decided it was time to detonate that table. In order to understand racism, we must first note that it does not operate alone. In terms of white supremacy, in Robin DiAngelo's best-selling book, White Fragility, she clearly reminds us that race is a social construct. She notes that freedom and equality, regardless of religion or class status, were new ideas when the United States was founded. But at the same time, the US economy was based on the abduction and the enslavement of African Americans. The colonizers who came were not free from their own deeply internalized patterns of domination and submission. This tension had to be reconciled in some way among the minds of the founders. Thomas Jefferson turned to science and suggested that there were natural differences between the races, and he asked the sciences to find those differences. The idea that racial inferiority was created to justify unequal treatment. The belief in racial inferiority is not what triggered unequal treatment. Capitalism. Malcolm X famously said, you can't have capitalism without racism. In 2016, Richard D. Wolff noted that the burdens of capitalism's instability fell much harder on employees than employers, and much harder upon some employees than others. Capitalism thus always faced a basic legitimation problem. How could it justify its unequal distributions of income, wealth, and the burdens of its systemic instability among the people whose condition of being free and equal capitalism was supposed to guarantee? By dividing human beings, capitalism's defenders could explain and justify why its economic benefits and burdens were so unequally distributed. Patriarchy. The JASS cross-regional dialogue brought together 48 global feminist activists. Maggie Mapandera from Southern Africa noted, "We call it Patrick. Patrick is an idea, a system, a persona with many forms and faces. Patrick works with its cronies, racism and capitalism, and other systems that collude to oppress women. Patrick is everywhere, even in your bedroom. Patrick tells you what you must wear, how you must look, where you must work, and what you must eat." So under that context, we are ready to begin our conversation with these amazing experts to share their personal experiences and their professional experiences with working with the issue of race. Now, I want to be clear that I know a lot of you are thinking, we're speaking to the choir, I've been involved with race relations and diversity, et cetera, for years, but the time is now to think about it a bit differently, to go a little bit deeper and to analyze your own personal biases and to figure out how we can really make this work, because it's obvious that our nation has a lot of problems with race and we all play a role in solving them. First, we have Karen Boykin-Towns, who is the Vice Chair of the NAACP Board of Directors and President and CEO of Encore Strategies, LLC. We have Marjorie Velasquez, who is a Democratic District Leader in New York. We have Dr. Melvina Wilson, who's at the Center for Advocacy and Research on Health Equity. She's the founder. And we have Wendy Fields, who is the Executive Director of the Democracy Initiative. So to start out, if each of you could just talk about the definition of racism in your view, from your perspective, and can you also share how you see it in your everyday work? If we could start out with you, Karen.
Well, first, let me thank Network Nova for having me and for really allowing for this true conversation, a real conversation on race. It's a subject that is uncomfortable. We don't have it enough. And so I'll just say that racism is the original American pandemic. I think we're hearing more and more of this, but it's a fact. And I think for me, racism isn't just how people may feel about something, it's about having the power in which to act upon it and do things that are detrimental to others. I guess only in the last couple of weeks, there's been a whole renaming of racism, for which Webster's Dictionary is going to update the true meaning of it. But I think at the end of the day, it is most destructive when it is in our institutions that, whether it be the criminal justice system, whether it be education, healthcare, all of which we have seen with this pandemic laid bare.
Thank you. Melvina, can you talk about your definition of race and how you see it, or racism?
So racism, again, thank you, Nova. Thank you, Krista, for inviting me to this panel. It's a esteemed panel, if you will. For me, again, like all isms, it's rooted in bias and prejudice, but it rears its ugly head when we start using our personal biases, our preferences, to discriminate, to keep others down, to keep our knees on the necks of individuals almost to their death, or at least to their detriment. And so in America, racism is rooted in our founding, right? It's rooted in our systems, as Ms. Boykin-Towns has said, but the way that it differs, the way that it disenfranchises, the way that it damages people of color, right? Usually we think black and white, but all people of color in this nation is where we really have to not just break the table, not just detonate it, but what are we going to put in place of that, right? And we don't want to rebuild off of the ruins of racism. We need to start afresh. And so hopefully these conversations that we're having right now in America about race will help us build on new ground with equality and equity in the foundation of that new table.
Excellent points. Marjorie, what are your thoughts?
Certainly, thank you so much, Network Nova, for having this opportunity to go ahead and let's be real. Let's talk about the realities of what we're born into and what we can effectively change and actually uplift each other. When we're looking, I'm here in New York City in the Bronx, where early on we saw it systemically, where it was the accessibility to PPE, to basic necessities like masks, to food for families, which is what I'm currently taking a break from delivering families, so pardon the appearance. What are we really doing in opportunities and taking space, and what does being an ally really mean, and what privileges we all have, and how can we use it to uplift each other, make sure that we are giving the voices a chance to be heard and a chance to actually make a difference.
Excellent. Thank you, Marjorie. And Wendy, what are your thoughts?
First, let me thank you, Krista, for all the work you've put into this, and for Network Nova for having me and to be on this esteemed panel. Let me first say I concur with all the speakers previous to me, and I will just add a couple points from my perspective. It is the consistent oppression of people to access power, and in every way of our life. Simply for me, in this transformative moment, not a change moment, this is a transformative moment. Change is not enough. So I really appreciate the honest conversation about what it will take to keep it, to really respond to the protests and the demands that we see. For me, I spent most of my life in the labor movement, so equity is huge. Policies that you've seen by diminishing the labor movement and making sure that corporations are not checked, but have the agenda, and use racism strategically. We live in a strategic, structural racist time where they have weaponized race. Every day we see it. So being conscious is not enough. Being active is a must. And then I spend most of my time today now in the nonprofit industrial complex, where it's not just a table, it's a white patriarchy footprint that must be destroyed. The way we train and activate, the way we don't invest in grassroots infrastructure, the way we don't have equal access to running for office, the amount of money in our political system, that we have to be a part of reform. And it's a mindset that everybody has something to offer, and that power moves power. Not desire, not intellect, power moves power. So for me, that's how I see this moment. At 57 years old, I'd like to sort of think that when I wake up in a year or two, that we have, we don't just get spots, that we get power.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you all for those definitions and just really setting the stage, because when we originally were planning this session, everyone said, well, wait, let's talk about what racism is. And we have different perspectives on it. So thank you so much. So there are plenty of areas where we disagree, and I'm sure we could sit here all day and talk about them. But in order for us to change our political systems, that's something else that the panelists talked about as we were creating this panel. We have to find some areas of commonality. There have to be ways across racial lines that we agree. So can you each talk about, from your perspective, where do you, or where could you, see mutual areas of agreement across racial lines? We could start with you, Karen.
I mean, I think it's a false narrative in the sense that, you know, we are so different, because actually we agree on the basics of, I think no one would say there should be a different educational system or there should be a difference in our healthcare system. Who once said that there is no Democratic or Republican or Black or white way you pick up the trash, right? So I think that we agree, but the question is, how does that get put into practice? So that is the area, because we agree that, you know, there should be broadband access everywhere. We agree that there should be affordable healthcare and accessible healthcare. So I think we have more in common. The question is, comes down to who gets to control how it gets done. And as Wendy said, it is about power. And the majority does not want to let go of the power. And that is when when we are on the come up and we are gaining that power, they will then do whatever it takes to try and suppress it. And so that's my point of view. And I think, you know, it's one that I would dare to hear. For what is it, don't we agree on those issues? It's the how.
Melvina?
So yeah, you know, an agreement is basically a mutually compatible situation, right? And usually disagreements are around those points that aren't compatible, usually with what I want, not what we need or what we want, but what do I want and how is it going to affect me, right? And so when she's talking about power, and oftentimes we like to say patriarchy is rooted in white maleness, it's rooted in white femaleness as well, right? And so we're all women on this panel, and we can all agree that women should have the right to this, and women, but until that agreement becomes personal and may take something from me, take some power from me, take some position from me, take some prestige from me as an individual, now we start to disagree. Because as Karen said, nobody disagrees that we love our families equally, right? That we would all want to be with our families in the time of COVID where they're passing away or they're struggling. We would want to be with our wives or our sisters or our cousins or our mothers as they're giving birth to our siblings. We would want to be there at end of life crucial times, but COVID has said that we can't, right? And more importantly, COVID has said that if we go to the ICU and you happen to be a different hue than myself, you're going to go home. I'm going to go to the morgue, right? Mm-hmm. And that is rooted in the structures that have allowed for different individuals to have access to power, to be born with a level of power based simply on the hue of their skin that I and those who look like me don't have. And so we're agreeing that America is in a unrest situation, and there needs to be change. But I'm not so sure that we all agree that the change that some people of color are asking for is the same kind of change people who are not of color want, because that means you have to cede power. You have to give it up. You can no longer have your idols subjugating individuals in communities where you don't even live anymore. But you have to cede that power, and that's where we start to disagree.
Marjorie, what are your thoughts?
So there's a lot. I'd like to echo, and when we're talking about even healthcare, right? The accessibility to healthcare. So there's a real issue with maternity mortality. And unfortunately, I lost a friend this year. It was a Black woman, complained about pain and was not hurt. And that's what we really need to, when we're talking about power, it's also like, what are we doing in these positions of power, especially within the medical field, right? Are we training folks to understand what it is to listen to our Black and brown voices and say, well, what does pain mean, right? Because do we have someone who understands that for Black and brown women, when we're discussing pain, are we being respected and understood and believed, right? And we're talking about that notion of believing. And when we're talking about folks that we're saying, hey, you need to be an ally, you need to be, that means listening, right? So part of the listening portion is also like, this is my time, this is my power, this is my privilege to go ahead and give my power and privilege to those that need it right now. It is ceding power. It is recognizing that there is a force to change. It is inside our medical systems first, right? How are we going to listen? How are we going to give our voices up to those in need, and how we're going to follow through, how we're going to hold folks accountable is the other lesson, right? There's listen, right? That's one portion, but then the next portion is how are we going to take action? What's a meaningful action to ceding that power? What does it look like? And I think that that's also in conversation to have with white folks. It's like, you think that ceding power is ceding your identity per complete, right? Or what does it look like to a white person? When in reality, we're also saying, we're asking you to listen. We're asking you to take action. We're asking you to treat us like you would treat your family. And it's tough, right? Because I think there's a lot of folks who understand it's, oh, but we're treating you like family. But would you do this to your family? Would you let your family member be in pain for so long? And I think it's taking those optics and making sure that you're coming from a place where you understand and you're able to be open to listening, which is a huge part of where we're coming from.
Marjorie, you bring up some excellent points. And that very idea of pain, almost the idea that Black women in particular are not women or not, you know, fragile like the white woman, and we should be able to take it, right? That's just who we are. So thank you for bringing up that particular point, and that's rooted in racism, obviously. So Wendy, please give us your thoughts.
So all powerful points. I would say a couple things. I think we all agree on upward mobility. I think we all want our future. I think we all want our children. We all want to have a better day, clean air, clean water. So I think we agree on many policy policy agendas. I think we actually agree that we're all demonized. Again, a weapon, right? And we're too aggressive, we're too loud, we're too, I'm loud. So when I'm loud as a Black woman, I was raised in a Caribbean house, and you better be loud or you didn't get anything. And we're bold, right? And we express ourselves in a different way. And so we need to appreciate that we are different and we have cultural and ethnic differences. And I love it, right? And I'm gonna do me. I think the thing that I think is a really other thing that we have to be honest about is the point that Melvina raised, if we're gonna go deep. From my perspective, I really talk about white male patriarchy because a lot of us lead in that way. That is what we were trained. That is what has been dominant. They like limited amount of people to have space. Power can be spread across and still be useful. That's what we learn in collective action. So I would say that another challenge on the table that's different between my West Indian mother would say, we were cleaning long before others were cleaning now. We were working long before others were working. And so too many of us, the discussion is we seek liberation through men. I don't think that's the case for Black women today. We respect them, but too much the dialogue is we seek liberation through men, old men. And to me, that diminishes our power. So if we want to have that's a conversation that I think I'm frustrated by. I see people I have worked with and I totally respect. And I'm like, really? Really? Oh, have we not had enough? At what point do we realize our liberation does not exist in people who do not experience our body, our child raising, our singleness? It is on our backs. And for Black women, it's a different way. And in white women, it's a different way. I can't speak to Marjorie's experience, but I know daggone well I'm better for it if I have embraced it. And so we need to get real in this moment about how we seek our liberation. It's why I love being on a panel with all women. And I'm gonna stop because I'm about to get I'm going this direction.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you so much. So let's talk about allyship, because I think even with some of the comments in the chat and a lot of the ways, there's a huge conversation right now about how we be good allies. Melvina, can you talk more about allyship?
And again, I think this is one place where we kind of diverge and not that it's bad, but some people think being an ally means saying, I support you, right? I'm from afar, but I support you. Go, girl, go. Hey, girl, hey. But for me, allyship means you making space in places I don't have access to. Because as a white female or a white male or even a Black male, you have access to rooms, to people, to resources that I might not have access to simply because I'm an African-American female and I'm thought of as others. So let's take it to healthcare, which is what I know, and maternal mortality statistics in the United States are worse for African-American women than in some third world countries, right? And so that white male gynecologist or that even that black female gynecologist knows things that I don't know. But you're not offering me access to that information. You're not offering me access to those additional types of care on the bedside. You're not even listening to me if I'm Serena Williams saying, something's not, I've lived in this body 40 some odd years. I got a birthday on Friday, y'all. 40 some odd years, and you're gonna tell me, oh, it's not that bad. I mean, of course you're in pain. You're having a baby. Something's not, and I know something's not right, but you won't even listen to me about me. And so to be my ally is that nurse who says, she's been my patient for the last 12 hours, something is different. Let's try this. Let's look at that, right? To be an ally is, you know, I'm not in that boardroom when decisions are being made about who gets funding and who doesn't. But you're at NIH saying, well, you know, we don't really like the way this is written. We're not going to look at the merit of the project. We don't like the way this is written. And so it never gets to the next step. So those African-American female researchers who are looking to research health disparities in their community never even get to the next stage. But you could have said, you know, maybe we can work on them on the way it's written. Yeah, there's issues with the writing, but the merit of this project, right? The spirit of it is something we should really be funding. That's being an ally, because you know things I don't know, and you have access to things I will never have access to until we build this new table. And so that's what being ally. It's not just rooting from afar and saying, oh, I feel bad about that, and oh, I wish I could help, or let me write a new check, or I'll go down and hold up a sign. You got to get in the game. Time out for being on the sidelines. You got to get in the game with me. And if it means you get dirty with me, then you got to get dirty with me.
Excellent, excellent, Melvina. And I hope that since we are talking about this kind of in a political context, I'm hoping that the attendees will think about what that means when you're working on campaigns, when you're being an advocate. How can you get dirty, like Melvina said, and Kelly just elaborated on again. Thank you so much. So, and I know each response is sparking a lot more questions. I'm going to try to get through our questions and get through the questions from the audience. So Marjorie, the idea of the white liberal, many times privileged, may be well-intentioned, but is not always helpful in terms of race or class. Can you talk about how this white liberal or idea has impacted your work?
Quite certainly. Especially when we're coming here now, right? We are bringing to the world, again, that Black Lives Matter, because for quite some time, we kept on saying it, kind of like when we were talking about earlier with maternity mortality, that believe us. We don't have to repeat it 10,000 times for you to believe us. We've said this, and we want you to listen. So we're going to do this yet again, because obviously it's not getting through to folks. And when we're talking about getting involved, there are some well-meaning folks. But if you want to be more than just well-meaning, you really, I have to echo what Melvina said, you really do have to get dirty. If you notice that something's going to happen and you know that you're going to be treated differently than that Black or brown person that's there, then you step it up and you protect that Black and brown person. You certainly saw it in the demonstrations where like young white ladies standing in front of Black men, in front of a police officer. Yeah, that's it. That's what allyship looks like. That if it. But what does it look like in a boardroom? Well, you bring it to the table, right? I'm sorry. This is an organization I work with. Let's bring them to the table. For me here, one of the issues that we had with food distribution is that there was none for the Muslim community. There was no halal food, and we were literally in the middle of Ramadan. What does that look like? Do I go out there and say, oh, let me just get some halal food? No, no, no. It means going to a pantry that's being set up for Muslim families in the district and saying, here, I know a source of halal food. Let's work together and make sure that our families are fed. That's it. Like that's how I did it as a white presenting Latina helping Muslim families? How do I do it as a white presenting Latina in a boardroom? It means literally, okay, well, this organization needs funding. Why? Okay, where is it going to go to? Is this organization representative of its district? Is it really helping the Black and brown people in the community? If it's especially a majority Black and brown community, what have you done? Are you just for show? Because you know what, you could totally be an organization, right, and say, oh yeah, and we're doing this and that. But is your boardroom Black and brown? Is it diverse? Are you really meaningful with your decision on keeping it diverse? Or are you just going to say, well intentioned, you know, at least I'm reaching out to the community? It's more than just reaching out. It's actually having representation, and it's having people at the table. It's actually providing folks that room to be heard, to be believed.
Krista,
Yes, go ahead, Karen.
Can I just make a few points? One, Martin Luther King said, the greatest stumbling block on the stride towards freedom is not organizations like the KKK, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than justice. And so that shows us, even back in the 60s, that, you know, in my mind, allyship isn't something that you get to call yourself. You don't get to define that you're an ally. In essence, that is a title that gets given to you based on your actions. And so what it looks like in the boardroom, because I worked in corporate America for 22 years, is when they're doing talent reviews and there happens to maybe be 1 or 2 Black people or brown people who they get to talk about. And there's the statement that says, well, there's just something about her. Or, you know, she doesn't quite have executive presence. What the hell does that mean? We kind of like work towards what it should look like, but those are the code words that happen in boardrooms every day that limit our progression because there is not a level of comfortableness.
It doesn't fit.
It doesn't matter where you went to school.
Yeah. I don't think she'll be a good fit for this company.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Marjorie. Wendy, can you talk about your thoughts on the equity of consequences?
So I think this is, for me, a fundamental point for everyone to understand. And I think we started to get to it. I think Marjorie or Karen started to get to this about ceding power. This isn't about who's going to be less than, or we don't care about everybody. That's not the argument. Of course we care about everybody. And we need everybody to make change. As the math works that way. That's the math in our democracy. But here's the difference. The equity of consequences for our community is much greater. And if we're pulled down, everybody's pulled down. Mm-hmm. So I thought to me, more of us are essential workers, as Marjorie said, right? More of our children are at risk. And so this is about making sure that in a country of indifference that is built on serious indifference and a lack of humanity, and of course slaves had the way they justified having slaves was to diminish humanity, was to look at us like look at slaves as animals. That justified, right? And so this is about us understanding as a community that we suffer the consequences at a much greater, generationally, wealth, equity, everything about us. Generations of food deserts only bring us generations of unhealthiness. And I think the most powerful thing that I heard was said yesterday by Reverend Warnock at this week at Richard's funeral. Mm-hmm. We have Minnesota, Lloyd, he complied and he died. and Rashad ran and he died. And Brianna was sleeping in her bed and she died. What are we supposed to tell our children? The pandemic has pulled it back. So, you know, some of these policies are going to have to go deeper, my friends, and they're going to have to catch us first. It's not just about what we're acting on, it's the priority. And sometimes we should not, my mother used to say about Aesop's fable, we may not be able to get it all because it's more urgent in our communities. And so that's the kind of reason why folks have to run and be part of the policy and be in the boardroom, because they weaponize that. They want to give us a little crumb so we go fight about that. So this we're not going to move until we get the consequences piece, because we're not going to, because I'm going to start somewhere in the back of our mind, oh, they're getting something more, right? That's why we lost affirmative action, right? We've been down this road before now, folks. This is not a new playbook. It's just a whole different set of characters in a 21st century where they can whip it and whap it on and weaponize it on Facebook, so, and on, you know, Twitter or TikTok. And so having that analysis is really important, and a strategic, thoughtful approach in this conversation, not just running out in the street, and understanding our space and how we're impactful. I can't, just because I like that issue, I'm not going to be able to impact that issue. But how you show up and lead and have courage and take risk with what you have, that's when we're going to get to that place of transformation, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. So, oh, Melvina.
To that point, I think, you know, we all want to figure out, what can I do? What can I do, little me, and wherever I'm sitting right now with the lack of power I have. We are more powerful than we think we are. And one of my favorite quotes by Alice Walker is, we give up power because we don't think we have it. But everyone, it's like a team, right? I played basketball, softball, my whole life. I've been on a team. And the key thing about a team is, even Michael Jordan would tell you this, he had to have, even though he was making 100 points a game, there had to be 4 other people on that court, because that's what was required to meet the rules of the game. So everybody on the team has a role that they can play. Everybody on the team, you know, you might not be the most dynamic shooter, but you play defense better than anybody else. Play defense better than anybody else. That's how championship teams are built. Everybody has a role to play. And I think when people are, you know, in the chat, what can I do? Where do we go? You got a role to play. Like Wendy was saying, figure out what you're good at and do that. And do that better than the person standing next to you. And if we're all striving to be our personal best, we're all striving for equity on the team. You know, one of the rules of Little League is everybody gets the bat. And somewhere along the way, we forgot that. Everybody gets the bat in Little League. I don't care how you get your 4, 5 strikes. You play all the bummers with little kids. You like, okay, how many times little Johnny gonna get the bat? Cause but everybody gets to play in Little League. And that's what we're talking about. When you see the rise, when you see the demonstrations, when you see the protest march, we've been doing this since the 50s. We've been doing it, or the 20s, when you think about women's suffrage and taking it back to politics. We've been marching and saying, listen to me, give me equal access. At some point, we have to say, no more. I'm not asking you anymore. I'm telling you.
Excellent point, Melvina. So I think a key part to a lot of this that we don't often talk about is trust. Karen, can you talk about why trust is so important when working towards common solutions to destroy racism?
Trust is at the heart of getting anything done, right? And I think that trust is also earned. And sometimes when you give trust just willingly and then it gets broken, that makes it heartbreak. And so I'm just going to go there, right? So when we talk about trust and building with white women, and some of my best friends are white women, right? So what the point is, though, that we have seen in some organizations, and I'm not going to name any names because when I say, you'll know, where Black women have been in leadership roles in these organizations, they have caught hell. Pure D hell. And we were working on the same issues. We had an agreement, but somehow trust was broken, and then they're out in the freaking media, you know, dragging people. And so it makes it hard. And so you got to have a good foundation, and a good foundation is built on trust. And I pray that as we move forward and we talk about allyship and the like, that trust is central and it will not be broken, because it is so hard to get that back.
Excellent. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. I want to try to get to some of these questions. Maria asked, Dr. Wilson said we cannot build off the ruins of racism. We need to start fresh. Can you please give an example or elaborate? What does building off the ruins of racism look like versus starting fresh? And this is for anybody, but definitely Melvin, if you want to answer.
So for me, it's like when you tear down a house, right? Sometimes you use that old foundation to build the new structure on. But what you get with the old foundation is what's rooted under there. You still got the tree roots that's under there. You got the old pipes that's under there. You got old concrete. But you're going to build this beautiful, elaborate, multi-million-dollar house on the foundation of an old footprint. That means you're limited to what that old footprint looks like. But if you take that same amount of money and you buy a brand new house and you build it from scratch, you get every single thing that you need. You get a room for every child. You get the big open floor plan that you want. And so we can't think about building on scorched ground, if you will, right? We gotta look for fresh ground. We gotta build from scratch. We cannot keep thinking that, oh, we'll just tear down these old structures and replace Patrick with Patricia, because Patricia's a woman and she knows better, but Patricia brings her isms with her. And I said this in the chat. So we gotta start thinking about diversifying this and building from fresh. We cannot use old models. We can't use old habits to go forward into the future. If we're still thinking that if we do what we did in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and 2000, we do what we did with Obama, we'll get another Black person elected. This is this change. And you see it in our young people. You see it in the way in which they are protesting. We gotta destroy these policies. You can make an amendment on me being 3/3 of a person, 3/5 of a person, but guess what? You don't change the mindset of the people who already read that I'm only 3/5 of a person.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So we have some more questions about allyship. And again, this is for anybody. Two, I'm gonna ask these. Does an ally make sure you get the platform to speak for yourself, or do they speak for you? And then what does allyship look like for an older white woman who does not sit on any boards or hold any positions of power, so she thinks?
So I'll just say, what it looks like not in a boardroom is when you are on Facebook and then there's some, crazy comment from a friend or a family member, is where you kind of like check them in that moment. It comes when you are amongst your friends playing bridge or having tea or whatever it is, but you're in a setting and there's a comment that is inappropriate and you speak to it. So that that is when we say there's a role that everyone plays. It doesn't matter whether you're, in a boardroom or leading an organization or just in your everyday life. There are moments when you can speak up.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to do a couple more questions. I know we're running out of time. I'm dealing with community issues. This is from Holly. People of color who people don't say hello to and don't feel welcome in my own neighborhood. Black men who won't walk alone at night. So how can I work to make these people feel safe and welcome in my own community?
Ooh, Wendy?
I think it's
It's funny. I think about neighborhood organizing a lot. And I think it's something that we've lost. We act very nationally when we know everything that changes. And one of the things I talk a lot about on reform issues is that we should be voting from the bottom up of the ballot. Most of the decisions are made at the bottom. It is where you're the most empowered. And I urge everybody, if you imagine, people don't go to, or you can go online now and see your city council meeting or your neighborhood. I grew up in New London, Connecticut. That was where I did my first bit of organizing around independent commissions and for police. And I will tell you that we don't show up at the town committee meetings. We are not in the commissions. We are not in those in the zonings. And if you want to make change and make your neighborhood safe, you better be there. And I'll tell you, you know, I said to somebody, you do it, I challenge everybody to do a little experiment. If you went week by week with your little pad of paper and a pen, and you went to the different commissions, and first you showed up with 5 people, and you showed up with 10 people, you don't have to speak right away. Get yourself educated, look at that, right? You will see a demonstrative difference, because people are going to say, now, how come all these people all of a sudden up in here?
Going up.
Sometimes it's not your mouth, it's your ears. God gave us these 2 things for a reason. And so, you know, that's where the power is. And the other side, the people that we don't share values with, oh, they have local plans, my friends. That's how they got the school board stuff done. That's how they got the, so I'm going to say to everybody, you know, November is important, but 21 and 22, my friends, that's where the change is going to come, right? And police reform is done in this at the local level. It is not done up at the top. And so we need to get ourselves back into our neighborhood and into that park, or into, that's where change comes from. And they are counting on us to be on Twitter and impotent and not know who we are. And so that's what I say, get there now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy, so much. And I would just love, very quickly, even though we've been talking about the local angle, I would love to end it on a national note. There's a couple requests for your thoughts on the vice presidential pick, in terms of who should Biden pick, and what are the implications in general in terms of race when we're talking about the November elections. If everyone wants to comment just very quickly.
So you know, it should be a Black woman, and it looks as though it's trending that way. And I think they are all fantastic. And we just, you know, we just hope that that is what actually happens. But I refuse to kind of want to pit one sister against another, because they are all phenomenal.
Absolutely.
And I will echo, you know, I love that he's made a demonstrative statement that it's going to be a woman. A woman of color would be great. But let's also remember that all skin folks ain't your kin folks. So just because she's a Black woman doesn't mean she speaks to my issues. So don't have me pitting my sisters, black, brown, yellow, or green, against each other. It needs to be a decision made on who's going to be the best person for that position, and potentially the first female president of the United States of America.
Yes. And I say what they said, and I'm going to say this: white women need to get with Amy Klobuchar and start talking. That's all I got to say.
Okay. Thank you. And Marjorie, do you have any final comments on that?
I second, third, and fourth all that was said. I mean, it's time. It's time to hear our voices. It's time to give us a platform, and it's time to actually make meaningful change, to listen to us, because we done tired of saying the same thing over and over and over again. Just tired.
Excellent. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you, Marjorie. Thank you, Wendy. This has been a great panel. You can tell from the responses in the chat, everyone's really enjoyed the panel. I'm hoping everyone did take away some action items, because I do not like speaking to the choir about, you know, big esoteric ideas, but there is a lot of action that can be taken. So I'll turn it back over to Catherine or Robin.
Thank you all. Thank you, participants.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That was a really awesome panel. And I think we did, Krista, you brought it, and I do agree with you. We need those action items. We need to understand how to be, what that word means, like how to be an ally. So all the comments really were just fantastic. And what's great about what we're doing at the summit, it just doesn't stop here. The learning just can't be a one-off. So we are going to continue educating, working together all the way to the election and past the election. Hopefully our goal is to make these new networks and connections and really build this power together as Black and white women and women of color and ethnicities. And I think women really together are leading the change. So, you know, so really thank you to everybody here. It's been great, and we're not done yet. As we say, we still have some stuff to cover for the last couple of minutes. And talking about women getting together, you won't want to miss tomorrow's session at 5 p.m. with the Virginia senators. We'll be getting together for cocktails and conversations, because we know change really happens when women get together, and it will be all about a little bit about mansplaining. So we have a cocktail selection for you, because women, we do like to have fun, and you can make sure today you'll be getting this email. You can print out your PDF and get your cocktails brewing. And we have a great one called Badass Woman Get Things Done Margarita. We have Flip Virginia Blue Lady, and we have Walk the Talk Cosmo, and we have, you know, Screw Orange One Driver. And that's the orange one. We don't want to talk about him. Anyway, so we love to have fun, and that tomorrow's word is about inspiring and invigorate. So with that said, make sure you come with your cocktail attire, your cocktail in hand. We're going to have a lot of fun with all the senators and a surprise guest tomorrow. Well, I'm not going to give away the surprise. Krista, thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Stare, who will tell us about tonight.
Thank you, everyone. That was very inspiring. So I hope to continue to be a better ally. Tonight we have Raising Rural Voices, and this is going to be with Chris Hurst and Wendy Goditis and Advocates V. Fry and Sister Simone. We're also going to have, it's going to be moderated by Lindsay Davis Stover, and we're also going to be having activists and candidates from the Rural Ground Game there. So you won't want to miss that, what's been going on there. And the summit recap of the session will be emailed out as it has been. And the videos will be up on networknova.org/watch. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the chat before I leave. And also, we would really like everyone to consider getting a When We Vote, We Win team t-shirt from the Badass Boutique. You see it's a new item listed up there in the left corner. And that is networknova.org/shop. So thank you, everyone. We want to say a last thank you to our faithful sponsors and partners. There's a slide for that. There it is.
Yay.
Win Virginia, Family Friendly Economy, VA Our Way, and our wonderful partners that you can see there. Vote Like a Girl. I haven't had a chance to say them for a while, so I get to say them today. Vote Like a Girl, Rowan Tree, the Impact Center, SOAR, Bard's Alley, Headshots by Sam, Virginia's List, Resisterhood, and Forward. Thank you all, and thank you all for being in the room.
Yes, thank you. It's a room where it really happens. We'll see you tonight at 7 p.m. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.